Hi, history kids. How are you? So we're here in Vista at the Steam and what? Steam and Engine Museum. And we're going to go on a little adventure. There's supposed to be a festival here, but it's next weekend. So we're here all by ourselves to play on these fabulous tractors and machines and to learn all about some early mechanical history. Let's go. Hi, history kids. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is industrial design. This guy. When we first came here last weekend, my wife, my 11-year-old daughter, and I all stopped and took this in. We're just like, wow, this is cool. Well, where did it come from? It came from an industrial designer. Someone drew this and said, this is what I want this 1954 Tucker Snowcat to look like, and voila, then they figured out how to build it. So if you think of yourself as an artist, maybe you should think about industrial design. Thanks.
So there's a designer behind almost everything. Cars, trucks, motorcycles, anything that you see, there's a designer behind it. And my good friend, my brother-in-law, Danny Pizarro, he's an industrial designer. I met him when he was about your age. He was in high school. And he loved to draw shoes, and he loved to draw cars, and now he makes a living designing trailers. And maybe one day he'll have a job designing cars or shoes. Anyway, behind all these fabulous things, there's a creative genius. And if you think of yourself as the creative type, maybe there's a spot for you in the world of industrial design.
Okay. Hi, history kids. So the next thing I want to talk about is graphic design. So an industrial designer figured out how to make this, but a graphic designer figured out how to put these letters together in a way that would be recognizable, in a way that would be memorable, in a way that people might begin to think of as a brand that they would recognize. And that's what a graphic designer does. There's all kinds of interesting graphic design throughout this whole museum area, and I'm going to show you some images of it. But it's another example of the way that you can apply artistic interests and abilities to a profession. And of course, for a historical question, there's all kinds of interesting historical questions we could ask about graphic design and how it's changed and evolved over time.
So graphic design is everywhere. You see it on logos, you see it on brands, and it's something that you can study in college. It's what my wife studied in college. Like her brother Danny, in high school she drew and loved art and loved drawing, but when she got to college she decided she was going to be practical and not study fine art, but study graphic design, thinking that that could be a profession, which she could have, and it is. But now she's turned back to fine art, and I met her when she was getting her master's in fine art, and now she does really interesting sculptures, and I'll share one with you soon that she's working on now.
Hi, history kids. So the next thing I want to talk to you about out here is children's stories. This is one of my favorite children's stories. I read this to my kids probably 300,000 times. And this, of course, is illustrated by someone that's called an illustrator. And in this story, one of the main feature characters of Are You My Mother is this big steam shovel that he calls a snort. And here, at the Steam and Gas Museum, I finally found the first steam shovel I've ever seen in my life. And fabulous old machines like this can inspire illustrators like this to make all kinds of fun and interesting stories. So, thanks kids. See you in a minute. Hey history kids. So the last thing I want to talk to you about on this little excursion is engineering. So like being an artist, engineers have to solve problems. They have to figure out how to do things that they know they want to do. So it's also a really creative field, and one not to be dismissive of just because you think of yourself as an artistic or creative type, because we need creativity in engineering. One of the most creative things ever made in the last couple hundred years were steam engines. We don't talk about steam engines a lot anymore, but steam engines were hugely important to the Industrial Revolution that we'll be studying later on. And one thing to ask is, well, what happened to steam engines? Why don't we talk about them that much anymore? And should we start talking about them? Maybe they'd be a vital source of some new power that we might need. Thanks, history kids. I'll see you later.
So that's about it, history kids. Now you can start thinking about historically interesting questions based upon the things that we saw at that museum. History of industrial design, graphic design, children's books, engineering. They're all perfectly good topics for a historically interesting question. The trick is to find one that genuinely interests you, that you're curious about, that you don't know the answer to. One that's researchable and likely to have different points of view. All right, thanks everybody. I'll see you in school.